My name is Jennifer Nevin, and I am a marketing manager at Brooks Publishing. Thank you for joining us for Recognize, Respond, Report, Preventing and Addressing Bullying of Students with Special Needs, presented by the fabulous Dr. Laurie Ernsperger, PhD and the Executive Director of Behavioral Training Resource Center. Okay, and then today's webinar is sponsored by Brooks Publishing. Sorry about that. Okay, and then for everyone listening in, there is a special offer on Dr. Laurie's book, Recognize, Respond, and Report. And you can find this on the Brooks Publishing website. And you can, if you use the code EdWeb20, you can save 20% off on that and all of our other all of our other educational resources. Okay, and then our EdWeb community. This event is part of the free Teaching All Students Practical Strategies for Inclusive Classrooms professional learning community on edweb.net. The recording, slides, chat log, and resources will be posted in the webinar archives folder of the community. As a member of this community, you will receive invitations to upcoming webinars. You can access all past webinars and participate in online discussions and take CE quizzes to earn a certificate for each recording you view. And then if you're attending today's live session, you will receive an email including your CE certificate to the email address you used to log in today. You will receive that email within 24 hours. If you are viewing the recording or have joined by phone, you will need to join the Teaching All Students Practical Strategies for Inclusive Classrooms community and take and pass a quiz to earn your certificate. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Laurie Ernsperger is an international speaker, author, and board-certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level. She is the Executive Director of Behavioral Training Resource Center and has over 30 years of experience working in the public schools as a classroom teacher, administrator, and behavioral consultant for children with disabilities. She is the author of 4 books. First one is The Keys to Success for Teaching Students with Autism, and Just Take a Bite, Easy, Effective Answers to Food Aversions and Eating Challenges, Girls Under the Umbrella of Autism Spectrum Disorders, and Recognize, Respond, Report, Preventing and Addressing Bullying of Students with Special Needs. So thank you very much, Dr. Laurie, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Jen, for that introduction. I'm so excited to do this webinar. I want to welcome everybody. I've been reading where you're from, so we really have an international crowd here today. And I want to start out making sure that you have my email address, because this is going to be a fast-paced webinar. I'm really trying to give you as much practical information as I can in a short period of time so that you can leave here today knowing exactly what to do to prevent bullying. So that Dr. Laurie at btrcinfo.com is the best way that you can reach me after today. So I want to welcome everybody. Again, my name is Dr. Laurie Ernsperger, and today's topic is going to be on preventing and addressing bullying of students with special needs. So thank you. Let's get started. And I want to just really share with you, how did I get to be talking about children with special needs? I started as a classroom teacher. I'm from South Bend, Indiana, and started as a teacher in South Bend. And for many years, I taught children with special needs. I was a consultant. But about 8 years ago, I met a young woman with autism. I was writing a book on girls under the umbrella of ASD. And I met Michelle, and I was interviewing her for the book of what is it like to be a person on the spectrum, a female on the spectrum. And Michelle is telling me about her life and many different stories. And then she started talking about what happened in school. And she starts really explaining to me and giving me these horrific stories of being bullied. She was harassed and intimidated, name calling. And I'm writing this in my notes. And as a teacher, it's breaking my heart to know that she went through this. She was in her early 20s when I talked to her. And at the end of her telling me these stories, she said to me, Dr. Laurie, after all these years of being out of school, one of the things that I still can't get over is the silence of others. And I'm writing this down in my notes, and I had to ask her, what do you mean by the silence of others? And she said, well, there were so many people who knew about the bullying. Teachers knew that this was going on every day. The principal of the school even had a meeting. The bystanders, the other children that saw this happening, and she said they were all silent. And it's just something that she could not accept and move forward, the silence of others. And so when I got home that night, I was writing this book, and so I'm typing out my notes. And when I got to this part of our interview, I read those words, silence of others, and I thought, that applies to me. I work in special ed. I was a teacher, a university professor. I trained teachers all over the world. And I never talked about bullying. I never talked about the impact of bullying for children with special needs. And I thought, you know what? I need to do something. I can't be silent anymore. And so that really started my interest in researching what should we do, looking into the laws. So that was really the impetus for me to start talking about it and training staff on bullying prevention. And it culminated in me writing the book. So the Recognize, Respond report, that's the title, that's the key area that we're going to be talking about in this webinar. But it was really that interview that got me thinking about my role. And really, I want you to be thinking about your role when it comes to children with special needs. And how can you prevent the silence of others? So I'm going to organize today's topic around these three areas: recognize, respond, report. And first of all, we need to recognize that bullying is happening. This is an incredible, important school safety issue. StopBullying.gov is one of the important websites I want you to click. Actually, all the links here are hyperlinked. So if you want to put that on your bookmark and go to Stop Bullying later on after today's webinar or in the future, StopBullying.gov is run by the U.S. Department of Education. So you're going to get some very sound information, factual information. But what we know is about 22%, 28% of students in the general ed population are bullied. And so they're answering the question, in the last year, have you been bullied in school? So that number varies, mostly because we don't have clear definitions of bullying. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Generally speaking, and again, if we're just talking about students in the general ed classroom, we might be able to say 1 in 4 students. That is an incredible number when you think about 160,000 students miss school every day because of bullying. It's hard to face that bully every day. Think of the impact academically. These students fall farther and farther behind. Think about the financial impact. They drop out of school because of bullying. So these are real numbers. This is happening in every school. Again, it's an international issue. But today we're more focused on children with disabilities. And so if we're looking at children with disabilities, some of the, again, general research out there talks about 60%. So more than half of the children with disabilities are bullied in schools. There was a survey done of adults with learning disabilities and asked them, were you bullied in schools? 71% of adults with learning disabilities said, yes, I was bullied in schools. Now, when I talk about students with disabilities, I'm also talking about those children, not just our students under the IDEA umbrella that have an IEP, but this also applies to children that have other health issues or a 504 plan. So if we're talking about children that might have diabetes and they require some special assistance and services, we know that children, even with allergies, children with obesity have higher rates of bullying. In my research, since I met with Michelle, one of my most impactful movies that I watched, a documentary from the Bully Project. If you haven't seen that documentary, it really changed because you cannot deny the impact of bullying when you see this documentary. So I want you to go to thebullyproject.org. That's another great website. And they have an educator's toolkit. So they have information that you can download, lesson plans, things that you can start doing tomorrow in your practice. But they specifically, one of the children in the documentary was a child on the spectrum. And I want to bring your attention to Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks is one of the largest international organizations working in the field of autism. And they've put out some research that 63%, nearly 2/3 of children on the autism spectrum are bullied in schools. You can go to autismspeaks.org. As a matter of fact, for some of you on a side note, April is Autism Awareness Month, and April 2nd is World Autism Awareness Day. So light it up blue. I'm wearing my blue shirt today in honor of creating an awareness of children on the spectrum and accepting and tolerating differences. So it's an important month. So be doing something in your school to share that information. But that population is very vulnerable due to their social and communication skills and other types of restricted repetitive behaviors. So we're talking about a large group of individuals. Now, I'm giving you some special resources here, and I'll be doing that, giving you some links for you to follow up today. But I want to also give you one of another website, the pacercenter.org. Again, you can link these, put them on your bookmark, because I know you want to take some time after today's webinar to really delve deeper into these resources online. But pacer.org is the National Bullying Prevention Center. They work specifically with children with special needs, children with disabilities, and their families. And you can go to that website, and they have areas that you'll be able to download free documents, lesson plans, activities for children, for teens. So I really want you to explore the pacer.org. But this quote is important to remember. Children with disabilities are quite vulnerable due to some of their cognitive delays and some of the behaviors that might interfere with their social skills. So pacer.org, great link for all of you. So we're going to stop here. We're going to do the first poll question. So I want to get some feedback to you. I know you're all chiming in, and I will get to questions at the end of the webinar. But now you can answer a question for me very quickly. So we're going to have that poll question, I think. Yes, here we go. All right. Now this is your chance, everybody who's, I've got 282 people out there. So here's my question to you. Which of the following is a type of bullying? So read through your list. Oh, already, great responses already. Don't jump in, read everything at once. As a teacher, I should have told you that ahead of time. Read all your answers first. So is verbal and name calling, is that a type of bullying? What about physical? Social emotional? Is cyberbullying? Or is it all the above? Let me give you another second to read. I know some of you are like, oh, I jumped into my answer. You can change it, that's okay. But of course, things like cyberbullying, which I'm not going to get into specifically due to some time restraints, but cyberbullying is not often included in some of the state's definitions of bullying. So you might have to look at your state to see if they include cyberbullying. All right, let's give you another second to give your response to this poll. And is it verbal, physical? And when I talk about physical, I'm also talking about physical destruction of property, like throwing a child's backpack into the toilet. That's something that a parent told me about. She couldn't figure out, why is his materials, his backpack, wet every day? Well, he couldn't tell her. He was nonverbal. The children were throwing it into the toilet at school. So let me stop the poll right now. We're going to stop voting, and I'm going to give a response here. So yes, it is verbal. Yes, when we look at types of bullying, physical, social, emotional, cyberbullying, but hopefully you said all of the above, which I can see right now that you guys already know your stuff out there. So I appreciate you chiming in. You'll have other opportunities as we move through today's webinar. One of the problems that has occurred in terms of definitions, I mentioned some states don't include cyberbullying, is there's really not specific information for every state in terms of a universal accepted definition. So the CDC in 2014 compiled, really gathered a task force. This is a blue ribbon panel of experts to come up with a definition that would be used either at the state level or for research. And you go to the CDC's website. I encourage you, this is another great link, the CDC's website, their Division of Violence Prevention, and you're going to be able to read what is a definition of bullying. It's unwanted behavior or unwelcome. It's a perceived power imbalance. Let me explain what I mean by that. Of course, when we think of power, we think of physical power. But can you think of other types of power imbalance? You can chime in if you want to. What other types of imbalance, power imbalance, are there at schools? We can think about gender imbalance. Is there males versus females? We can think about academic imbalance. So children that are in gifted programs, do they have more power than children with disabilities? Other imbalances might be things like economic, financial imbalance, age imbalance. Good answer, Jessica. Exactly. Older students in a school versus younger. Popularity, skills. Nice answers, everyone. You're right. So we have to be more inclusive when we talk about the imbalance of power. And the last thing, it causes harm. So this is a definition from the CDC, and you can go to their website and actually read their definition. But for children with disabilities, this has been already designed and in our laws, starting with Section 504 back in 1973. This is nothing new. There have been protections for children with disabilities dating back decades, including the Americans with Disabilities Act and IDEA, which for some of you who are old people like me, but not old, started teaching in 1985, Public Law 94-142. Back in those times, we still had protection. So there's these 3 federal laws specifically protect children with disabilities, including our 504 students. And because these laws could literally fill a room with documents, right? And I'm not an attorney, so it would be tough sometimes to read the legal language and understand it. What's happened over the last, since 2000, the education department sends out to schools what's called Dear Colleague letters, DCL for short, Dear Colleague. And there's been 4 specific Dear Colleague letters that have been sent to schools that apply to any school that receives federal funding, these Dear Colleague, that clarify the protections that children with disabilities have. So you can download these 4 letters. If you go to the website at the ed.gov, you just put in the Dear Colleague letters and bullying, you're going to see these letters. Some have also been from the Office of Civil Rights. The Office of Civil Rights, OCR, is the investigative arm of the Education Department. Now, I know I've got international listeners and attendees today, so you may not have that specific department in your education arena, but it's important that you understand that children with disabilities often, I speak a lot in Ireland. I just got back from a week in Ireland doing training there. They also in Ireland have protections for children with special needs. But these letters clarify specifically how children with disabilities have additional protections. And it's not enough to say ignorance. I didn't know about this. I didn't know that it existed. We have to know. These letters have been sent to schools again, starting in 2000, clarifying and providing technical assistance to schools. So please download those and give them to staff. If you're an administrator, share this information. The 2013 letter, I should point out in particular, has an enclosure that has evidence-based practices for preventing bullying. It's a quick 3-page overview of what you should be doing. It is your checklist of what to do. So if nothing else, download the enclosure. It's a PDF document. But what OCR has said, the Office of Civil Rights, it's the investigative arm for the U.S. Department of Education, they've said that disability-based harassment creates a hostile environment that's severe and persistent that impacts the child's educational program. And that's the part I want to hit upon. Educational program doesn't just mean from the classroom at 9 o'clock in the morning to the classroom at 3 o'clock. It extends beyond just the classroom day. It extends to the bus. The bus is part of a child with disabilities educational program. They have a free and appropriate public education. They have a right to ride the bus. They have a right to attend extracurricular activities. And if they are being harassed, if there's a hostile environment that impacts their ability to participate or attend extracurricular, then a school needs to address this, and I'll be talking about that more in our investigation on the reporting. I had a parent tell me the other day that her child, since the beginning of this school year, has been hiding in the bathroom during lunchtime because of the harassment in the lunchroom. That child, this is a child with a disability, has a right to be in the cafeteria and eat lunch. So when we say educational program, it's not just classroom in the morning to classroom at night. It extends beyond. And that's what OCR, those letters clarify for you. So we need to be knowledgeable about what the federal government is sharing with us to understand those three laws. Now, the court system, some cases have gone to the courts. Unfortunately, some parents have felt that the school wasn't doing enough, and they bring a lawsuit against the schools. This happens more and more. And there's something called the four-prong criteria. I'm not going to go through this now, but I just want to bring notice to it so that you understand that there is criteria to meet the standard of disability-based harassment. So I'm going to explain this more when we get to the report. Remember, today's webinar is Recognize, Respond, Report, and I'll be talking about that later. But I want you to know those federal laws. So the three federal laws, Section 504, the ADA, and IDEA, they are federal laws that protect all students. But some of those federal laws are in conflict with your state laws. So let me give you an example. My state, I live in Nevada, our state definition says bullying is a willful act. So they include terms in our state definition that are not in alignment with the federal definition. The federal definition says bullying is an unwelcome act. Federal, like OCR, is going to look at bullying in the eyes of the beholder, bullying through the victim's perspective, not through the intentionality of the child who's exhibiting the bullying behavior. So it's not that the child who's doing the bullying can say, oh, I didn't mean it, right? I was just messing around. No, federal law looks at what is the harm to the child with a disability. So look at your state laws. If you may have a state law like mine that is in conflict with the federal law. Another conflict that I see with federal laws versus state laws is the reporting requirements. If a child with disability is being harassed and bullied in school, you must report and take notes and investigate and stop the bullying and harassment. But believe it or not, in this day and age, some states don't require reporting. I want to ask you, does your state require reporting? I was recently in a state, and I won't call out where I was last month, and they did not require any documentation, any reporting. Well, that might be at the state level, but when it comes to children with disabilities, the federal level trumps, and it says you must document and have documentation and reporting. So you can go to Stop Bullying. Yes, Virginia does. Yes, New York does. Yes, New Jersey. I'm reading some of your posts. Love New Jersey's harassment and intimidation and bullying, the HIV. I'll talk about New Jersey later. But if you don't know about your state, some of us don't know our state laws that well because that's not what we're doing right now. Go to StopBullying.gov, click on the map, click on your state, and you can find out what your state's reporting procedures are. So be careful, the federal law versus good answer, California, not sure. Okay, you're going to click on StopBullying.gov to find out. So that's okay if you don't know, but you'll know after today. Now we're in the Recognize, and I gave you some numbers. About 1 in 4 children are bullied when we talk about the general education population. We can double that number when we talk about children with disabilities. So what happens when we talk about harm, when we talk about trauma, we know through the research over the decades that bullying does inflict harm, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety. Of course, you wouldn't want to go to school. Some of you might be able to remember somebody who bullied you, and it stays with you a lifetime. It's not something you just get over. I think about Michelle and the silence of others. She could not just move past that. It creates physical health issues, which then children absence from school. So if you have a child right now and they're absent from school once or twice a month, but for no specific reason, tummy ache, headache, the mom's not really sure, the dad's not really sure, you need to ask, is it because of bullying? Because it does manifest itself with some physical ailments. And then the long-term mental health effects. This carries over into adulthood. And unfortunately, it may include thoughts of suicide. And that's not an easy topic to talk about for anybody. We don't want to say that bullying causes suicide. There is not a direct causation. So we want to be very careful in our language, but we also don't want to minimize the long-term effects. And so we, be in terms of what your knowledge is, understanding how it might impact a child. Let's talk about the bully. And I don't want to label, bullying or the bully should not be a forever label. It should not be. Bullying, students who exhibit bullying behaviors, we can teach them new skills. And so we have these bully stereotypes, and unfortunately, they may follow a child. We have these kind of movie stereotypes of who the bullies are, the Back to the Future kind of bully. They're stronger, or they lack self-esteem, or bullies come from dysfunctional homes. All of that is not true. Bullies can be the nicest child that comes from the best home, but it's the environment of your school. If you don't have a school that targets respect for all and diversity, where teachers are positive role models, then yes, bullying can live in that environment. I also want to clarify when we talk about the bully that bully victim dynamic, that is fluid. You might have a child with a disability and you're thinking, well, they're not the victim of bullying, they are the bully. And yes, that does happen. It's not a one or the other situation. It could change. The child on the bus might be being bullied when they get to school, or they come to your classroom. If you're a resource teacher, they're actually bullying other children. And so we need to look at this as a very fluid situation where we're not just labeling the bully or the victim. So I want to stop. I've just gone through, and I know I'm doing this quickly, but you can go back and watch this webinar again. It'll be archived for you. So if there's something that you missed, you can also email me at drlori@btrcinfo.com. But we need to recognize that not only is bullying happening at much higher rates than we want to admit, but that it also has a long-term impact. And in order to end the silence of others, we need to do some interventions. All of us need to respond. And that's the part I'm going to talk about next. How do we respond? And I'm going to use the triangle. Most of you are familiar with this kind of tiered response, a multi-tiered response to bullying, because we use this when we talk about RTI, we use this when we talk about positive behavior supports, that it's not just we're going to suspend the bully. We need to look at school-wide interventions, our lowest tier universal interventions. We need to look at classroom interventions, and we need to look at individualized interventions. So I want to make sure the framework, the visual that I'll be using when we talk about respond, is that we're going to look at 3 tiers of response, or a multi-tiered response to bullying. So let's talk about district and school-wide. Let me just also say, I appreciate your comments. I know some of you are putting questions out there, and the people at Brooks and EdWeb, they will be collecting questions. So if you came in late, I'll be doing some Q&A at the end of the session. So don't think I might be skipping those. I'm not going to stop. I'll be presenting some information before we get to those. But keep your questions coming, and we're going to get to as many of those as we can, and comments at the end of the session. So recognize the 3 R's: respond, report. Let's delve deeper into our response. What is our response at the school level? What kind of universal intervention should be in place at every district and school level? And that's what I want to give you some specific ideas of what to do. First of all, is there a policy? And again, this is where it's a discrepancy with state by state. Some states require your schools to write a policy, but some states don't have that requirement. So you might check this out. Does my school district have a bullying policy? And if so, where is that policy? Where it needs to be is on your school district's website. This is a perfect, if we have a policy and we have a website, let's put those together. because we should be very transparent to parents and students. What is our policy? And so I have a school districts here. This is a little shout out to all my friends in Texas, Hondo ISD. There is no doubt about it that Hondo ISD has a bullying policy. You can see that big red stop bullying. They make it easy for families, for the community, and for their students to know what is that policy. So put it on the link on your website. In addition to just the policy, I also want you to link resources from the Pacer Center, from Bully Project. I'm going to give you more from StopBullying.gov. Let me just give you a little scenario. Most of you are probably school personnel, but many of you are also parents. And it's a Friday night, your child comes home, you finally get a chance to sit down with them, 6, 7 o'clock, and your child, who maybe has a disability, tells you they're being bullied at school and that they've been skipping class and hiding in the bathroom. What do you do? This information should be at every parent's fingertips. That parent shouldn't have to wait a weekend to Monday morning to find out what to do. They should be able to know, how do I protect my child? How do I talk to my child about being bullied? How do I minimize this harmful impact? And so you want to have links on your school's website. This is a universal intervention of what a parent can do before Monday morning. And so also resources for students. What do you want the students to do? And so this is an easy, and it's free, right? You have the website, you have the policy, we just need to get that information together. So we want to make sure we're using our websites to share positive policies that we already have in place. So let me stop and ask another question. Ready for a poll question? This one is a little bit trickier because I really want you to think about it, and don't jump it quite yet. So I want you to think about the question here. Should schools survey their students regarding school climate, and should they be asking specifically about, are you bullied in school? Do you know somebody who's bullied in school? So I want you to think, some schools do surveys, school climate, do you feel safe in school? But should those questions delve a little deeper? Should we be asking students, what kind of bullying do you see in our school? So those types of bullying. Are you experiencing physical? We need to ask those specific questions. And so far, I'm getting some really good answers here, but I want you to think about it. Should our schools be surveying students? How are we being held accountable if we don't have the data directly from our students, right? We can't just, we'll talk about reporting. So I want you to think about, should schools, give you another minute to answer. And remember, these surveys, are they accessible? Some of you are saying, yes, my school does survey, but are they accessible to children with disabilities? So are they accessible to children that are visually impaired or deaf and hard of hearing? And so in order to be the silence of others, to end that silence and prevent the silence of others, we have to know, what is the level of bullying? So I think we've got a good number here, and I think we've all kind of leaned in one way, but maybe we can think about this question. I'm going to stop the polling right now. And most of 100% said yes, we should survey our students. Students with disabilities, we can make sure that we ask them those questions. Maybe we're going to make some modifications to a survey. Maybe somebody's going to read the survey to a child. Maybe the survey is going to have visuals to go along with it. But I am going to survey all students about, are they being bullied? How do I prevent bullying in schools if I don't know what types? Where is it happening? When is it happening? We need to look at specific. And so I love the National School Climate Center. That is a website, a resource that you can go to. They have bullying surveys there for you. If you just Google school surveys, California has some amazing school climate surveys, and specifically that they ask those questions about bullying. And I can't say this enough, every school needs to be doing anonymous surveys that ask the tough questions. If we're creating a positive school climate, yes, I agree. I love Allison. Agree, yes. pros and cons. It's free, right? You download, some people are actually doing surveys online, but you can download. Very minimum instructional time. So it may take 5 or 10 minutes out of the teacher's time. And now we have reliable data that we can actually go in and target our programs based on our data. Remember, you can't fix what you don't look at. We can't be silent on this issue. And so many schools don't survey their students, so they don't know the level of bullying that's occurring. So I want you to think about this as a school-wide intervention. Another school-wide intervention is creating a school safety team, and it would be their job to coordinate activities, to maybe create the survey, to disseminate lesson plans and books and resources like from Pacer Center so that every teacher knows about it. And I just love this quote, "Many hands make light work." This cannot be just the job of one school counselor. One school counselor cannot be your all bullying prevention person. In order to sustain a bullying prevention program in a school, this has to be a team approach. So that team has to include parents. It has to be inclusive of students with disabilities, and teachers. So we all need to have a part in this role, including community stakeholders. So does your school have a school safety team that meets monthly, that keeps an agenda, that looks at the data and makes data-based decision making? So I want you to be thinking about that as you're moving forward with your interventions. What else we can do school-wide is staff training. Staff training, you know, the NEA, I'll talk about in a minute, the National Education Association, surveyed teachers. And 98% of teachers, 98, and I'm sure it's probably even 100% of teachers said, yes, I am responsible for my students creating a safe environment so they're not bullied. But less than half of the teachers said we get any bullying training or what we should do. So there's this huge gap in our responsibility, and yet staff training is lacking. And so one of the things we need to train is, how does a staff member respond to bullying? How should you respond? If a staff member walks by and sees a child be pushed and name called, we don't want that staff member, the paraprofessional, the support staff, to just keep walking by. That is tacit approval that we allow bullying in this school. So how should a staff member respond? Should they respond like this picture here? You see this staff member, this teacher? We don't want them to humiliate students. This isn't about shaming a child. And see the child in the background? He's watching this role model. We have to be role models as teachers of what to do. And this teacher or paraprofessional, whoever, whatever role in school, maybe the principal, they are not modeling an appropriate response. And so each of us has to be responsible. So how should you respond? You don't want to walk by. Well, go to the NEA's website. The NEA, the National Education Association, has a toolkit that you can download for staff training. And so we need to continue to think about, what is our protocol? One thing that we do very well at school is we create standard operating procedures. We have standard operating procedures for fire drills. We have them for lockdowns. We have them for evacuations and shelters and all sorts of food contamination. Where is your school's standard operating procedures for bullying? What should staff do? What are the steps? And these should be very clear and concrete. I just snapped this picture. I was in a school. You've seen these, right? We post them in schools, fire drills and so forth. But I don't see any, what do we do if you see a child being harmed or a child being intimidated? And so we need to create a protocol for staff and train bus drivers and paras and our support staff and to every teacher, administrator, counselors of what to do. We want them to stop the action. We want them to talk to the students in a respectful way. We want them to then have the students disperse and walk away and make sure that we supervise and create a safe environment. And I know that seems very simplistic, But this is where the school safety team comes in, where they create a specific protocol for your school. But if staff aren't trained, they're either going to do one of two things. They're either going to walk by, or they're going to overreact and actually escalate a situation, as we saw in that picture. We don't want our staff to be physical or aggressive. We want them to demonstrate how do we positively respond to an incident of bullying. Now, I know I've talked a lot about bullying. I've said that word, but as the introduction, if you missed that, I'm a board certified behavior analyst, which means I study behavior. And one of the things we know about behavior is if we want to reduce a behavior reduction, we also want to increase a behavior acquisition. So if we don't want children to have these conflicts or bullying, what do we want them to do instead? Well, we need to teach kindness. We need to teach caring and empathy, teach tolerance. That's a great website, teachingtolerance.org. And so you've probably heard of the organization Random Acts of Kindness, right? RAK. They have a free educator's toolkit on how do we don't want to just talk about bullying, but we want to talk about kindness and creating respectful learning environments. And so you can download this free lesson plans that goes K to 12. Some of you are saying, well, I'm preschool. Yes, preschool you might be seeing incidents of bullying at preschool. I'm not disagreeing with that. And you could then modify those lesson plans for younger students as well. Oh, bucket fillers. Janet, thank you so much. Janet just reminded me, I love bucket fillers. It's a program. You can go to their website, Bucket Fillers. Again, it's talking about how do you fill somebody's bucket. So Harvard has a program called Making Caring Common. We have RAK, the Random Acts of Kindness. So there are programs out there in schools. I want you to explore. This is where your school safety team, so that not every teacher in the school is having to recreate the wheel. We want to have these at our fingertips so they're easy to implement. So I do love Bucket Fillers. That's a great program, and it's not anything you have to pay, right? So it's free. So bullying reduction, kindness acquisition, caring acquisition. We want to increase those skills. Caring is sharing. I love that, Mary Jo. So I'm talking about a multi-tiered response. Let's talk about now the classroom. I'm moving up my triangle. And bystander education has to be taught in every classroom. What are bystanders? Michelle Borba is a child psychologist, and she says bystanders play a critical role in ending bullying. When we know that about 85% of incidents of bullying occur with other kids around, we know that we have to involve bystanders in a positive way. So one of the programs out available is called Upstanders in Action at bullybus.org. And they have this, you can download this image or this little poster for your classroom. Maybe you're going to download it in black and white, have the children color it if you're working with younger children. But it really explores that there's the target. A bystander is just somebody who stays silent or just walks away. And then the upstander actually stands up to the bullying. Now, I love the idea of this, but I want you to keep in mind, not every child can be a superhero. It takes quite a personality and character that would actually stand up to a bully. Remember, they've got the power. Even adults might be intimidated to stand up to a bully in the workforce. So think about saying to a child to stand up to a bully. And I really want you to explore with your students, brainstorm other ways they can be an upstander. Brainstorm other ways to be an upstander, like telling a child you can sit with us, like giving advice. Some schools are doing a buddy bench so that kids come together. So being an upstander does not mean actually physically standing up to a bully. There are other things that our students can do to help protect children with disabilities that can minimize that long-term harm of bullying. And so if you want some ideas, this is a free poster. You could download it today from my publisher. This comes out of my book on bullying prevention, Recognize, Respond, Report. If you see something, do something. And it's really talking to students about what you can do. First, recognizing bullying, what can they do, and report to an adult. So that's a free poster, just something else to add to your collection of curriculum around bullying prevention. Now, remember, I'm talking about classroom level interventions. And of course, this is where literature really can be helpful. Literature, sometimes called bibliotherapy, it's kind of the fancy word, but it's really using books in order to explore complex social topics. And so books like Jake Drake and the Bully Buster. Anybody know some books? You can chime in. What books do you use to explore complex social issues? And it allows your students to see that social situation from somebody else's perspective. And we can explore, well, what did that character do? And so I want you to get together a library of books on different topics, including children with disabilities. I have to hold up a book. My mom turned me on to this book. Anybody read this book? You should know by the cover whether you have or not. Let me show it again. Read this book? Wonder. My mom actually saw it on TV and she said, have you read this book? And when I read it, it's so powerful. And I won't give it away, but this is a book that you can use in your classroom to explore how did it feel to be the child with a disability? How did it feel to be the bystander? The 100 Dresses, that's another amazing book. If you're not sure what books are good for your classroom, you can go to the website readwritethink.org. Or if you're a Pinterest person, I don't know if any of you Pinterest, but you can do a Pinterest on bullying books in the classroom or books on kindness. So it's not just focusing on bullying. I just read last month to a kindergarten class here where I live in Las Vegas. I read The Invisible Boy, and that went over great. I mean, we were able to explore all the characters of the book. So bibliotherapy. Now, I want you to be thinking about classrooms once a week, even if it's a short, even if you've got 5 minutes, okay? I'm not saying it's going to take the place of another lesson plan, but if you've got 5 minutes, you can do the crumpled paper activity. And just look this up, Google the crumpled paper lesson. Have any of you done it? Chime in if you have. The crumpled paper lesson, I won't go through all the specifics because I want you to Google it so that you can learn more about it. Yes, I've done it. I've done this lesson. Thank you, Emily. But it really targets about once you've said the words, you can't just smooth things over. And so the quote, before you speak, think and be smart. It's hard to fix a wrinkled heart. And so if you've got 5 minutes, let's do this activity and talk about that. How about doing a little art project? How to be a friend. This was Crayola had this on their website the other day. How to be a friend, just a unity chain. What about videos? Have your students make videos. You want these activities to be student driven. As I mentioned, I was in Ireland last month and a student in Ireland, and I want you to go and watch this. It's really powerful. His name is, I want to get it right, Luke Colhane. And if you go to YouTube, it's Create No Hate, and it's about cyberbullying. And so this student from Ireland created this video. And there's many videos out there. But what about your students creating a video? That might be a project that you take on, over a period of a few months. And what about journal writing? Got 5 minutes? Have your students answer a Dear Abby question. And I actually did this in the book, and you can download samples of responses from the kids that I had journal write for Dear Abby. And they're really, some of them were so meaningful. They were reaching out, and I gave them little scenarios. What would you do if? Or I'm a 4th grade student with a learning disability, and I'm getting teased on the bus. And then they responded. So when we talk about literature or classroom levels, it doesn't have to be an hour long. It can just be a quick 5-minute activity. But we want to embed these throughout our classroom activities. So thank you for your response. You've done the Crumpled Heart Project. Excellent, Karen. So there's others on there. But just if you Google the crumpled paper lesson, you'll get those lessons. All right, we're moving on to individual levels. I did school-wide, and I gave you some very specifics of what to do. Then I moved up to classroom level. Again, we delved into bystander education and how can I address that topic and explore it in other ways, in many ways. But now what about the individual student with disabilities? What do I do? How do I help them, assist them? And the antidote to that is teach. We're teachers. Whatever role you play, we're all teachers. I'm a teacher. And so I'll always be a teacher. And that's something that we know we can do and working with children with special needs. So put yourself, I want you to look at this photo for a minute. You see this out on the playground. We have a child with a disability and they're being taunted. The other girls are pulling her ponytails, they're pushing her, maybe saying names. What do you want her to do? How do you want her to respond to a bullying incident? Because remember, children with disabilities may not only be bullied in schools, this may also happen in the workplace and as they get older. So this is a lifelong skill. How do you want her to respond? Now, I'm going to stop you right now because I know some of you, and don't write this down in the feed. I know what you want them to do is maybe turn around and push back. I know as a parent you might say, get physical, but that's not the correct response. We want her to respond in an appropriate way that's going to grow with her as she gets to be an adult. And so any Massachusetts people out there, any Massachusetts, I want to hear a shout out. They are doing something remarkable in Massachusetts, absolutely remarkable. They have required that every IEP team, yay, Mass. Okay, Christy, I know things always look better on paper, so I'm not sure how this actually look in practice. So this might be a situation. As I read this, you can go to the Massachusetts Department of Education, but they require when you sit down as an IEP team, when you sit down as a 504 team, you must ask the question, is this child vulnerable to bullying? You have to at least ask. And right now, we're not asking. We're not even exploring. We're just, so in their special factors on their IEP or under other considerations, they have to ask, is this child vulnerable? If no, then we're not going to address it in the IEP or 504 plan. But if yes, we're going to write goals. We're going to write accommodations and modifications. Yes, New Jersey, Suzanne, you read my mind. It's about being proactive. We're not going to wait till the harm is done. We're going to include it and say, we want to teach this young girl the skills that she's going to carry with her. So what are those skills? And they come around the social, assertive body language. And I'm going to break it down for you. And this is down to preschool, up to high school, secondary, the CALM approach. So remember the letters CALM. And this was first written about by Dr. Michelle Borba. I mentioned her earlier. So you can feel free to go to her website, michelleborba.com. And I've taken this and just expanded it for children with special needs. So each one of those letters is one of your goals that you're working on. And if you're a parent, I know I have a couple of parents out here who are saying, I have a child who's being bullied. This is something you can do at home. So CALM. It starts with the C. We have to teach children the response to bullying is not to get hysterical, is not to cry, is not to overreact. You have to stay cool. So it comes under this emotional regulation. So some of you are teaching using a social emotional learning curriculum, then this fits in nicely with that. We need to teach children with disabilities, if you're being bullied, it's going to cause anxiety. It's going to cause stress, right? Stress. And so that's for all ages. Well, how do I teach about stress? How do I teach a child how to respond to stress? I love using visuals because visuals, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. And so do to learn is a great way to get free visuals. Anybody using do to learn? Do to learn has this. They have an angry thermometer, but they also have a stress thermometer, anxiety thermometer. The goal is for the child to recognize that when you're bullied, sometimes you're in the red zone. And then how do I respond appropriately if I'm in the red zone? So I need to teach a child those stress management. It's got to be part of our everyday curriculum. How do I calm myself down? What measures do I do to take a breath? I need to practice with that student breathing. I need to practice with that student stress management. So remember, we're doing the CALM. The A is assert yourself, though. So you have to be cool, but also you have to stand tall in the face of being bullied. We don't want them to cower away. So what does assertive body language look like? We need to practice. Repetition is key to learning, particularly for children with disabilities. Lots of repetition. So I've got a role play. Maybe use video modeling is a great way. Peer instruction. So I'm using my peers to teach the correct response on assertive body language. And what does it mean to stand tall and chin up? So you need to break down the skills on the goals. And then we're going to, throughout the school year, be practicing those skills. How about writing a social story? Any of you using social stories? Well, write a social story on how to respond to bullying, including look them in the eye. And this is difficult for some students, but if you're just looking at me for a minute, we don't want our children to respond head down, cowering away. Teach them chin up, shoulders back, stand tall. Lots of practice, lots of role modeling, using peers. So yes, awesome. Love that you're using social stories out there. We use them for a lot of things. Absolutely. Write a social story on bullying. This is going to apply to many of your students. Awesome. And the M, CALM. Mean it. What do you want them to say? So that little girl on the playground, she's getting bullied, name called. She needs to have a response. So we need to script an appropriate response. I've learned the hard way, and I've heard from teachers that some of our students respond in inappropriate ways, physical, and also saying the wrong thing. So 101 great comebacks from bullystoppers.com. Stop that. Back off. Leave me alone, right? Get away from me. But if we don't have a script, have you ever been in a situation where you stressed and didn't know what to say? And then afterwards, you were like, oh, you know what I should have said? Well, it's too late. Well, we want to be like my friend already said, one of our colleagues, attendee said, we need to be proactive. So we need to teach so that the child knows what to say. CALM, those are your goals. Now, let me switch a little bit, but what about that child who's also victim and the bully? Well, where is that on their IEP? You know, as a BCBA, of course, I want to do a functional behavior assessment. I want to do an FBA. I want to find out why. Why are they bullying? Is it for attention? Maybe. Maybe they don't have any other friends or get any attention from their peers unless they are mean and say something or push. So for students with disabilities that are exhibiting bullying behaviors, you want to also, as a team, ask the question and then write those IEP goals. Also focusing on peer buddy systems so that they have a friend when they go out to the playground, like that buddy bench. You guys are just giving me great ideas. I hope I can come back and read all of these websites that you're sharing with me. Thank you so much. But I have to move on to the last R, and I know this, I'm going to run a little bit over. If you have to sign off, this will be archived so that you can finish it if you only scheduled an hour. But I want to say thank you for sharing your thoughts with me today. So the 3 R's: recognize, respond, and now report. And that's how my book is organized as well. Well, let me, I want you to think about it. I'm going to ask you a question. It's not a poll question, but I'm going to ask you right now to be thinking about, if I put you on the spot and I said, how many incidents of bullying was reported in your school in the last month? What about the last 3 months? What about in the last year? Would you be able to get that number? Does your school require reporting? I mentioned this earlier. Does it even require reporting of bullying? Some states don't have reporting laws. So let me give you an example of New York. And I hope if anybody's from Yonkers or New York, this is certainly not dissing. I just wanted to give a real life example of what I'm talking about when I say there's a gap in reporting. So I'm sure this is being corrected, but this made the news in my bullying field, that New York schools required bullying. They required reporting. Awesome. That's perfect. But after the first year of requirement of this reporting, only 51% of schools said they had zero bullying. 51. Half of the schools said, nope, no bullying in our school. Can that be true? And Yonkers, this again, it was a news article, said that with 26,000 students in their school, there was no reports of bullying. And I want you to think about that question because I'm going to ask you a poll question. Can that happen? Is that statistically possible when we know nationally about 25% of students are bullied in schools, when we know double that for children with disabilities? And let me share another number. When it comes to more severe bullying, like what Michelle shared with me, it was happening weekly and daily. That's about 8%. If you go to the CDC's website, they have a bullying fact sheet. 8% of students reported being bullied weekly. So can you get to zero? It makes me wonder, why aren't we having more reporting? We're not going to get to zero reporting and bullying. We're always going to have some amount of childhood conflict. We're going to have some amount of this. Think about it. Are we ever going to get to zero suspensions in school? Probably not. Are we ever going to get to 0% dropout rates? Probably not. But we're going to prevent and be proactive and do as much as we can in terms of evidence-based interventions to lower those numbers. That doesn't mean zero. And so if you do a survey, I want you to look at this little graph. If you do a survey and you survey your students and 38% say, yes, I've seen bullying in the school, or I've experienced bullying in the school, but you only have 8% reporting, what accounts for this gap? What accounts for this gap? So let me give you a poll question. So let me stop for a minute. Now I want you to answer the question. Is it possible for any district, whether New York or Ireland, or I do training in Melbourne or Australia, is it possible for any school to have 0% annual reporting? Is that possible? Now, I know some of you are saying, well, ours, it's a good school. We have good teachers. We are already implementing research-based methods, maybe the Alveus bullying prevention. Some of you have heard Alveus bullying prevention program. The OBPP Alveus, Dan Alveus, he is the pioneer of bullying prevention in schools. But can you get to zero? Can you get to zero dropout rates? Can you get to zero suspension rates? Give you another second to chime in. What do you think? Is it possible for an annual report to be sent to the state that says zero reporting of bullying in our schools? Well, you may say, some of you are saying, yeah, it could say zero reporting because we don't do reporting. So it's a zero. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll. Thank you. Let's take a look. Some of you did say, yes, it is possible. But statistically, it is not possible. So statistically, when we're talking about complex social issues, and when we look at these national prevalence rates, 8%, go to the CDC's website, 8% saying they get bullied weekly. I don't know how that would be possible. But how can we make sure that we don't have zero? That's, I know we want to reduce bullying and increase kindness. But how are you reporting bullying in your school? I actually had a school tell me, and I get to talk to teachers all the time, and they said, well, we have one person who has the reporting form. The school counselor actually has the form. They have a form, and one person has it, the school counselor, and they only work 2 days a week. And she's the only one who can fill out that form. Well, if we put up enough roadblocks to reporting, then yes, that's going to be a problem. We need to make it easier to report. We want to protect children. We don't want to wait for the harm to be done over a long term. We want children to come to us. Remember, when we talk about high school students and them reporting to an adult, it's only 22%. So how can we increase reporting measurement? And think about on your website, is there a way to report bullying on your website? Now with smartphones, there's apps for reporting. So maybe your school has developed an app for reporting and it goes directly to the principal or an administrator. We should not put up roadblocks to bullying reporting. We should make it easier and more acceptable so that we can get in there, investigate, and stop the bullying so this child is not having the long-term impact. So think about why don't you have it on your website like Hondo ISD? It's free. And if your state doesn't require it, schools should do the right thing. I love this program, Hero in the Hallway. Hero in the hallway, or put the bully in the box, which means we want to create that awareness and promote and reinforce children that are bystanders, that are seeing this happen to children with disabilities, but they stand up and they feel like they can report it to an adult. Now, I'm a mind reader. I know some of you are saying, but what about false reporting? Because this comes up quite a bit. False reporting, yes. Although I'm telling you right now, schools that implement more accessible reporting are not saying that they are getting more false reporting. But what you need to do, if you're concerned about that, and rightfully so, is just make sure it's in your policy that's on your website. If you false report as a bystander, as a student, as a parent, this is what will happen. So there is a clear and concrete policy on false reporting, and we follow through with that. So it's part of our student code of conduct. So I understand there's a concern. I'm just not sure that that concern really shows itself when we look at the data. Now, I want to move on the last few minutes. Let's say you have reported or you're aware of a student with a disability that's being bullied in school. How do we end that silence? Well, we have to investigate. And I know for many of us, we're not trained in investigating. This is where I want to talk about New Jersey out there. New Jersey talks about how do we train investigators. So principals are not trained in being the police. They don't know how to investigate or interview, because you can't just ask a yes or no question, right? You don't want to just pull a kid out of a classroom and say, hey, Tom, did you bully Jessica yesterday on the playground? No, I didn't do it. Oh, okay, right? You didn't do it. That's not the questions we ask. We don't do it in the hallway where it can be very intimidating. So the atmosphere. So New Jersey actually has training for those people who investigate. But according to the Office of Civil Rights, this needs to be done in a reasonable time frame. We're talking within a few days of that report, that we're interviewing not just the victim and the child who's bullying, but also the bystanders. And we are maintaining our records. You know, if you've been in special ed for 1 year or for like me, 30 years, you know that we keep documentation. We are maybe it's good and maybe it's bad, but we keep documentation. We write things down, and we maintain records. And this is no exception. You need to maintain your records. And it comes back to, if I'm investigating, remember the law, under those 3 federal laws, there's a 4-pronged criteria to determine disability-based harassment. Is it a child with a disability and they were harassed based on that disability? Is it sufficient and severe to create a hostile environment? Did the child know, did the school know or should have known? And did they fail to respond? Now, that's a very high bar to meet. That is quite a high bar. So when parents are bringing lawsuits, or if OCR is investigating, that's high to meet that level of disability-based harassment. But just because I don't meet all 4-pronged criteria does not mean the child has been denied FAPE. And that can be a lower standard. So my parent who told me that her child is eating in the cafeteria and has been the whole school year because of ongoing daily intimidation, that might not be rise to disability-based harassment, but it definitely rises to a denial of FAPE. And that IEP team or 504 team needs to meet. Now, if you're saying, how do we have one without the other? This is where you need to download those Dear Colleague letters. It took me some time, or if you want to email me, I can give you those links at drlori@btrcinfo.com. But what if we say, yes, this child has been denied FAPE, or it's been harassment under those federal guidelines? We want to prevent any kind of retaliation. We want to make sure that we limit interaction. So some schools write a contract with the bully that they're going to stay away. We also want to make sure we remedy the effects. So this is language out of OCR, so that the child maybe needs counseling because of the trauma that's occurred. Or we need to write in the IEP for that child who's in the restroom during lunchtime, we're going to increase supervision during the cafeteria time. And we're going to do ongoing surveys and ask students, do you see bullying in the cafeteria? Again, I can't manage if I don't measure it. And so we need to be looking at the data. And of course, monitoring next week and next month to prevent that retaliation. Now, I want to also share what not to do. What is not recommended when it comes to children with disabilities and being bullied or harassed in school is restorative justice. I know what you're thinking, but our school is doing restorative justice and it works and it's an effective research-based intervention. Yes, but it's not recommended for children with disabilities. It should not be a cookie cutter intervention that all students have to go through this peer mediation or restorative justice system if your school has adopted that, because it may be very much harmful or re-victimizing that child with disabilities who's face to face with the perpetrator. They may not have the necessary communication skills, social skills, or their anxiety may interfere with their ability to really benefit from your restorative justice program that you've adopted. So I want you to be careful. Your school may be doing restorative justice, and yes, it has been shown to be effective for our general education population, but I'm cautioning you, it is not recommended as an automatic program to be used for children with disabilities. So I know I'm wrapping up here and I've gone over a little bit of my time. Our goal was to do recognize, respond, and report. And so hopefully you've gone through each of those areas and you've got some additional resources and training. But maybe you're still learning, right? We're all still learning because there's this relatively new field for many of us. We haven't explored some of the research. And so you can email me. I'm going to take some questions here in a minute. But I do want to thank Brooks Publishing, my publisher of my book, and Ed Webb for sponsoring today's event. It's been a great webinar, and you can share it with your colleagues. I'm going to answer some Q&A. You can email me individually if you want some more resources, if you want to learn specifically how you can prevent bullying, or if you have a situation with a student, or maybe you just want to bring me to your school because you're saying, I need our staff to be trained. Email me at drlori@btrcinfo.com and we could talk about training, because I travel and I train teachers either an hour-long training or even longer. So I want to thank all of you, and really I want you to go back and think about Michelle or your students, and I want you to join me in ending the silence of others, because I know together we can make a powerful impact on this in school. So thank you very much, and let's move to questions.
Okay, Dr. Laurie. A lot of the questions that were sent in the beginning have been answered, so I have a list of about 6 right now that I'm going to ask. Okay, how can we best as educators help parents understand better what bullying is?
I love that question. And I'm going to expand it to not just parents understand, but students understand. Because I showed you that graph where 38% of students said either they were bullied or they saw bullying. And that is a high rate. It's above the national averages that we have. And you know what that tells me? Students don't understand what bullying is. We've used that term so much that children think, and parents think, it's bullying is also normal childhood conflict. And normal childhood conflict is going to happen, particularly when we remember you have to meet that CDC definition. Is there a power imbalance? If you have 2 equal peers, but they're having conflict over something that happened, that's not bullying. And so, how are you using this? How are you using your website to share this information with parents? So, give examples, right? So, we give examples of what is bullying with our definition. So, each piece, we're going to break it down and give concrete examples. And if you go to the OCR letters, they give concrete examples and examples of normal childhood conflict. So, we want, because there can be gray areas. But the more we can explain to parents, write it down, have it in our policies, explain it to students, give examples. But no, we're not going to get rid of all conflict. We're humans. Humans are going to have that conflict, but we need to define and give examples between what is bullying based on our school's definition, and what is normal childhood conflict between two equal peers that is not creating a hostile environment and is not having the long-term harm. So I think it's information, it's training for our parents. And we need to offer parent training in a variety of formats, in writing that we send home, on our websites, in-person training, right? Maybe we're going to have the principal do a video clip, and they're going to be able to hear the principal explain this as well, or your anti-bullying team. So again, just like we teach students using multiple methods, we have to train parents using multiple methods. And I think it's just a lack of training and clarification of the difference between bullying and normal childhood conflict. I hope that helps.
Oh, great. Great answer. And we had a lot of questions about what happens if the bullying takes place outside of school. So, for instance, cyberbullying. So, if a parent is coming in and they're saying that their child's being cyberbullied, or, stuff's happening on the bus, what should we do?
Well, the bus is different than cyberbullying. So the bus is part of the school educational program.
Okay.
And this is where we definitely have to train our bus drivers that they must report, they must intervene, and we need to have that standard operating protocol for bus drivers because they can't just stop the bus every time. What do you want the bus driver to do? So the bus situation is definitely within the realm of the educational program. Now the cyberbullying, and I wish I had another hour
Yes.
explain cyberbullying. One of my colleagues in the field, Justin Patchen, I think his website is the Cyberbullying Research Center. He's written a couple of books on this, and you can go to his website. But if it impacts the educational environment, so if the cyberbullying, and nowadays kids are carrying their phones throughout the school day, and so what started as maybe Snapchat at home is now also Snapchat right in the school hallway, then there's clearly that overlap. But there are laws that protect freedom of speech, the First Amendment. And believe it or not, some cyberbullying that occurs outside of school is protected speech. It is a crazy, very difficult for schools and a complex issue much beyond our time. If you want to email me, I can give you Justin's exact website because he's definitely an expert in cyberbullying. I cannot tell you that I'm an expert in that area, and I don't want to talk outside that area. But if it impacts, so if the phone is in the school, oh, and the other thing that I want to bring up is if the students are using the school's internet, even if it's outside the school, but they're out in the front campus and they're accessing the school's internet, that then is a school issue.
Okay.
But these lines are not clear, and we don't have specific court cases yet to kind of clarify. So lots of learning in that area. And I know for parents, we're concerned about this because it's 24/7 cyberbullying. So thanks for the question.
Sure. Another one we have is if teachers hear of something, doesn't that mean we have the right to report it, or only if we have evidence?
Again, the discrepancy from state to state, if I'm hearing
Yes.
that question correctly, do you have the right to report it? You should report it. I'm telling you, if I was a teacher now, this is not 1985 when I started teaching at Navarre Middle School, students with behavior disorders. It's not. We didn't do any reporting. But if I was a teacher, if my school didn't have a form, even though many schools now have adapted and have a specific bullying reporting form, if your school didn't, I would write it down, put it in my file, and hand it to the principal because you have a duty to protect these students. You have a federal duty. And if the school is not as far along as we want, some states have just now adopted bullying prevention laws. Montana, just in the last year, has adopted bullying prevention laws. So we're very state by state. But what I would do if I was that teacher, and I would write it down, I would report it, and I would do as much as I can to prevent and go through these interventions that I'm talking about today. So whether your school has a reporting form or not, you have a federal duty as a special ed teacher or any role that you play to report that bullying.
Okay, great. So basically, you answered all of our questions with that, all of our remaining questions.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yes. So, because a lot of the ones that were asked actually in the beginning have already been answered throughout the webinar. So, for all of our listeners, if you do have any other questions that have not been answered, if you just put them in the chat, and then once the webinar is over, I will email these to Dr. Laurie, and then we will post these in our EdWeb community, if that works.
That sounds great.
Okay. And here I am back again. Okay, so thank you again, Dr. Laurie. I think everyone can agree that was a phenomenal webinar. Great information. Bullying is a very tough subject and very hard to try to deal with and identify. So thank you again. So if you would like a copy of Dr. Laurie's book, we do have it available on brookspublishing.com. If you use the code EdWeb20, you will get 20% off your order. And I know everyone listening wants to have a copy of the book. Okay, and then we have a lot of questions about getting your CE certificate. If you logged in live with your email address, your certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours. If you join live by phone, or if you're watching the recording, you need to take this CE quiz. And you can do that by joining our EdWeb community. So it's edweb.net/inclusive education. And Brooks Publishing is the sponsor of this webinar. We are the publishers of Dr. Laurie's books, and we thank you for taking part. You can keep up to date with Brooks Publishing on our Facebook page. We have a Twitter, a Pinterest, and then we have an actual Inclusion Lab blog, which brings up topics such as bullying and other situations that happen in inclusive classrooms. And then Brooks Publishing will be hosting another webinar on Thursday, April 14th at 3 p.m., engaging all learners, the 5 steps to creating more inclusive classrooms, and that's presented by Dr. Julie Causton. She's a professor in the Inclusive and Special Education program at Syracuse University. For an invitation to the next webinar, you can join Teaching All Students at our EdWeb community. So if you've enjoyed today's webinar, please join the free inclusive education community on EdWeb, where you can access all of our past webinars. And as a community member, you also receive invitations to our upcoming webinars. So thank you again to everyone that has taken part in this webinar, and another thank you to Dr. Ernsperger for participating. I'm going to go over in the chat, and all the questions that are asked that haven't been answered, we will send over to Dr. Laurie, and we'll put that in our EdWeb community. So thank you again.